Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third session of our compelling series, Echoes Across Time, Voices of Survival and Lessons for Our Future, in cooperation with the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center. We are honored to have you join us for this profound exploration of history and memory, drawing lessons that inspire a more just and informed future. We're also very thankful that you were very patient with us when we experienced technical difficulties that was a global outage 2 weeks ago. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, I am Ellen Resnick, the Educational Programs and Outreach Manager at Classrooms Without Borders. At CWB, we are dedicated to opening minds and hearts through transformative educational experiences. Through our work, we connect participants to history, memory, and culture in ways that inspire reflection and action. If you would like to make a donation to support our programming, my colleague Jackie Goldblum will drop the link in the chat for you in just a moment. Over the past 4 years, CWB has hosted 672 virtual programs engaging a global audience in meaningful dialogue. This academic year alone, we are hosting 235 in-person programs and have brought together over 8,000 participants, fostering deep connections and impactful learning experiences. Since our founding more than 14 years ago, we have reached over 106,000 people across 84 countries and nearly every United States. Looking ahead, the 25-26 academic year is already becoming an exciting one. We have over 60 captivating events on the calendar and many more in the works. Today's session features Generations of the Shoah, Passing the Torch, featuring Esther Toporek Finder, founder of the Coordinating Council of Generations of the Shoah International, and Sharon Buenos of Zikaron, BaSalon, who will address the pressing issues of legacy and the vital role younger generations play in carrying forth the memories of the Holocaust. Please send any questions you have to me, Ellen Resnick, in the chat. We are honored today to welcome Tali Nates, the founder and director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center and the chair of the South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation, a historian and global lecturer on Holocaust and genocide education, memory, reconciliation, and human rights. Tali was born to a family of Holocaust survivors. Her father and uncle were saved by Oskar Schindler. She has contributed to numerous books and documentaries and has served on the international advisory and academic boards dedicated to Holocaust remembrance and education. Her work has been recognized with numerous awards, including the Gratis Agi Award from the Czech Republic and the Austrian Holocaust Memorial Award and the Goethe Medal of Honor from Germany. And with that, Tali, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and welcome to everyone to this very important series this year. It's wonderful to see you, Pinchas. Pinchas was our first guest in the series, and we had a conversation, Pinchas Guta and myself, about not only his survival, but about life after survival, telling the story, not telling the story. What do you do with your story? How do you live your life? How do you build a life? It was really, really a meaningful conversation. And for those of you that missed this first in the series, I recommend to ask for the recording. Our second in the series was with Michael Berenbaum. Professor Michael Berenbaum spoke about not only the general lessons that we learn from the survivors in today's world, today very wounded world, very difficult world, but lessons about democracy, the importance of democracy. What did we learn from a past without democracy? And we thought that in this time, this third in our series, we look together with second generation, with third generation descendants at we are nearing in the next 10, 20, 30 years with the younger survivor at 80 to the end of the era of the witness. So what is the role really of survivors to passing the torch to the descendants? And then what is the role of descendants in this keeping the memory, keeping the history alive? we look at lessons learned. We looked at it in the past. We will look at it also today. And of course, much was done in the last years. Testimonies recorded, collections created, from Yale University Furchanov Archive to the USC Shoah Foundation, and to many more. Many museums, like the ones in South Africa, for example, in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban, are collecting testimonies, local testimonies as well. Museums were built, films were made, new dimensions in testimonies. Pinchas, of course, was the first archetype, but many others were after that, and other ways of memory. So we thought that it would be really interesting to speak to two colleagues, two friends, Sharon Buenos and Esther Toporek Finder, to look at memory by descendants around the world. I myself am also a descendant. My father was a survivor. And you see the picture, the background picture behind me. One of the things that I did was to build a museum in Johannesburg. But also, I had the honor to host Zikaron BaSalon in South Africa. And one of our survivors, Irene Feynman, spoke at Zikaron BaSalon in February at the United Nations headquarters in South Africa. And that was amazing. So it will be fantastic to hear from Sharon first, and then to hear from Esther after that, and to have a conversation about some of the ways descendants can contribute and can take these memory, but also education and lessons forward. So Sharon Buenos is joining us after, days of Zikaron BaSalon in Israel. And one of them, Sharon, of course, is with our own survivor from South Africa, Wanda Albinsky, who spoke at Zikaron BaSalon in Israel. But Sharon serves as the global director of Zikaron BaSalon, and she will tell us more about it, and I'll put her full CV or full bio in the chat. Sharon, please join us and tell us about Zikaron BaSalon.
Tali, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. What a difficult act to follow after your first two sessions, and definitely after your opening. It's great to be here, although, as Tali said, I've been running around in the past few days in multiple Zikaron BaSalon gatherings. And for those of you who skipped the Hebrew lessons in school, Zikaron BaSalon translates to memories in the living room. And I'll share a very brief presentation, so we'll have plenty of time to converse and discuss what we do. Bear with me as I start the presentation. Okay. I hope everyone can see it, and please disregard the gray bit. Okay, so we'll start with the story of Zikaron BaSalon and how it came about. And I think one of the things that Zikaron BaSalon did in the very short time is really changing the way we commemorate. And the reason why I say changing is because Zikaron BaSalon brings the memory to people's homes. It's alongside the ceremonies, the museums, the things that we do outside. We want to take the personal responsibility and bring the memory into our homes, into our hearts. And Tali mentioned this briefly now in the opening. I think the essence of what we do is not only to remember the past, but for us to commit to creating a better future by learning the lessons of the Holocaust, of the Shoah. And I've chosen to bring a short paragraph from the Survivors' Declaration that was written over 20 years ago by a group of Holocaust survivors and was read by a Holocaust survivor and a good friend of Zikaron BaSalon, Tzvi Gil, who unfortunately passed away only a few months ago. In Jewish tradition, the command to remember is absolute, but its obligation does not end with the cognitive act of memory. It must be connected to both meaning and action. Today, we for whom the memory is burnt in our heart and on our flesh gather to pass the torch of memory to the next generation. We pass to you as well the fundamental lesson of Judaism, that memory must be accompanied by action of ethical and moral intent. This must be the foundation and the focus of your energies towards the creation of a better world. And this is exactly what we're trying to do at the Zikaron BaSalon. So let's go back to the first gathering that took place in 2011 in Israel. A group of young Israelis were looking for a new way to connect, to remember, to talk about the Holocaust. And they gathered in one's home. They invited the Holocaust survivor Hannah Gofrit, and if we'll have time, I'll tell you what Hannah does nowadays. And when Hannah began, the first thing that Hannah said in 2011, when she sat in front of the group of young Israelis, she said, "I hope I won't bore you. You see," she said, "I don't have a number tattooed on my arm. I was not on a death march. I was just a young girl in hiding." Of course, once Hannah finished her very moving testimony, someone pulled out a guitar, they began to sing, then they had a very hearted conversation about the lessons of the Shoah. And very intuitively, the host said, "This year I hosted, next year it will be in your living room." And she said it to the group. And this is how we've managed to grow. Oh, sorry. Wrong thing. This is how we managed to grow. And just now we've marked Yom HaShoah. Zikaron BaSalon has become an Israeli tradition, but it's expanding outside of Israel with 2 million participants in 65 countries. And we've done research, and we are in the process of another survey that will be conducted this week to really understand the impact that Zikaron BaSalon has on the Israeli society. So I've given you the short version of how it started, but what Zikaron BaSalon really is. And Zikaron BaSalon is a journey through time. And the idea is to bring personal narratives, personal testimonies into people's homes, but it's already so much more than a home. It happens in classrooms, in universities, in synagogues, in community centers, in churches, on rooftops, in the city square. It's really, it has a life of its own. But we want to do two things mainly. We want to listen, we want to hear a testimony of the past, and we want to have a conversation. We want to see how we can take those lessons and help create a better world, like it said in the Survivors Declaration. Now, Tali mentioned that we are 80 years past since the end of the war. And as time moves on, we unfortunately have less and less survivors, Holocaust survivors, that are able to give their testimony. And Zikaron BaSalon, while the testimony, as long as they're Holocaust survivors, we'll do everything in our power to allow them an opportunity to share. We understand that it's not going to be the case in few years' time. And we now know that it's on us. And when I say it's on us, I mean that it's on each and every one of us. The lessons, the memories of the Shoah cannot only lie on the shoulders of Holocaust survivors or their descendants. We have to make sure that when we say never again, we mean it as human beings. We have to make sure that each and every one of us remembers what had happened and pass it to the next generations. I want to end this very brief presentation with a video of Mordechai Chechanover, another good friend of Zikaron BaSalon. For years, Mordechai Chechanover said to us one thing, which you'll see in a second. And unfortunately, a few months ago as well, we said goodbye to him. And now it's on us to make sure that his memory and the memories of others stay with us.
שמי מרדכי צ'חנובר, אני שרדתי את השואה, והנה, אני עומד בפניכם. עליתי לישראל והקמתי חיים חדשים. מאז ציוויתי על עצמי לספר מה שקרה לנו שם. בעוד כמה שנים, ספרי הזיכרונות והעדויות המצולמות יחליפו אותי. אולי שנה הבאה אני לא אהיה כאן, אבל אתם כן. אתם יכולים להמשיך ולספר את סיפורנו. In der Kuźnie bei dem Feuer von sein Pune mit Eichen Schweiz. יש עוד המשך, אבל זה מספיק.
It's the first Yom HaShoah that Mordechai is not here with us. We've been, this video this clip that you saw was recorded during COVID. And when you record these things, you think, oh, we have, till they're 120. But reality hit, and it was very difficult this Yom HaShoah because we parted from many, many good friends, many dear survivors that were very, very close to us. And so I urge each and every one of you to take this personal responsibility to take a memory of someone, whether it's a survivor or a victim of the Shoah, and pass it to the next generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And we are going to come back to you, of course, in a few minutes and talk more about you and your role and also more about Zikaron BaSalon. But I want to invite now Esther Toporek Finder, who is, of course, a member of the Coordinating Council of Generations of the Shoah International, what we call GSI, and also president of Generations of the Shoah Nevada. And I will put, Esther, your biography, your full biography in the chat in a minute. But I thought that you, of course, you are a second generation. You are like me. And I thought it would be really interesting to hear, first of all, just briefly about your story, about your parents, who was the survivor in the family, how did you grow up to carry this, this burden or gift of telling the story forward as a descendant. So maybe let's start there.
Okay, both of my parents were survivors of Auschwitz. They're both from the same little town in Poland called Blask, outside of Łódź. And so I have to say that I was really very lucky, not just because I had wonderful parents, but both of my parents survived with siblings. So I grew up with aunts and uncles and cousins, and the survivors networked a lot. So I would hear a lot of stories. Mostly they spoke in Yiddish, and I eavesdropped, and I heard the stories that way because they didn't speak to me as a young child, but I knew something had happened to them. And before I got my mother's stories, she died. My mother died when I was in high school, before we had the technology to record testimonies that we have today. And so I don't have her voice recorded anywhere, nothing. I just have the old home silent movies. But my dad lived a lot longer than my mom did, and I have his testimony. And when I heard that, I started first taking oral histories with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. I used to live in the Washington, D.C. area. And I started doing some of their interviews. And I was just so sorry I didn't have my mother's story anywhere. I only have pieces of her story. And then when the Shoah Foundation started recording testimonies, I joined them. I was doing interviews for both. While I was teaching, I was a psych professor. So I was busy with that, and I wanted to get as many stories recorded as possible because I knew the clock was ticking and we wouldn't have an indefinite period of time. So I got involved with all of that, but that's not all I was doing. I also was president of the Generation After in Washington, D.C. for 15 years. And from Generation After came GSI, as you mentioned, and both Tali and Sharon are on the coordinating council with me. So I'm with some sisters here today. That started in 2002. And GSI is a very unusual organization. It's dedicated to freely sharing information and resources. We have no president. We have no spokesperson. We collect no money. And we have the chutzpah to call ourselves a Jewish organization. And we've been around for all these years. And every month we put out a newsletter with information on what's going on in the survivor community around the world, among the museums and memorials around the world. And it's free. You don't have to pay to join. You don't have to pay to post information. It's a labor of love for us. GSI is now trying to give birth to a larger organization, the Holocaust Intergenerational Global Coalition. It doesn't roll off the tongue. I'm sorry, that title was created by committee and it just doesn't roll off the tongue. But HIGC includes members in Central and South America, as well as Australia, South Africa, UK, Israel, and North America. So that network is growing. And again, we're sharing information, resources, trying to help each other. So that's what I've been doing in the survivor community.
Esther, I mean, it's quite interesting that you professionally taught psychology, and can you talk to us a little bit about why are you the child that is remembering? Why were you the one that is carrying the descendants' voice? And is there connections for you between your professional work that you can maybe suggest for us to reflect on or think about?
For me, when I was growing up, I couldn't understand how anyone could do the things that were done to the Jews. How could anyone do it to another human being? It made no sense to me. And especially, how could anyone do these terrible things to my mother? My mother was such a sweet, kind person. I found it unfathomable. There must be something about us as people that makes some of us susceptible to those kinds of acts and others not. So I was curious about that and I wanted to learn more. So I went into psychology. So I'm sure going into psychology was related to my family, my upbringing. And then along the way, whenever I was teaching, if I could bring in something that was Holocaust related, I would. So in social psychology, I got to talk about the Milgram experiment, the Ash experiment, the Zimbardo experiment. I got to talk about the power of the situation and all these things. So I brought that into the classroom and showed my students where this was real. So, and most of my students were not Jewish. So that was a different audience for me. So to me, they went hand in hand. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I listened to to a psychologist that started also a museum in Poland, and he said something along the lines of, personal memory. Why do you look at yourself and at your memories to learn to do things better, to do things differently, not to repeat patterns that are perhaps not so useful for you and so on. And he said that he spoke about Poland, but he spoke about collective memory and the issue of learning from the past. So I was quite curious, and you were so involved in so many different projects that I wanted to ask you specifically about taking testimonies. And you are still taking testimonies. So
I'm
maybe
doing one tomorrow.
Exactly. So maybe speak a little bit about these years of capturing testimonies of survivors. Did you notice differences? What do you notice about the times, that we're living in? Some of the messages, are they changing? And also involvement of families, photographs of families. So maybe connect between the act of taking the testimonies and the families of the survivors, the descendants.
With regard to the taking of the testimonies, many of the testimonies I'm getting now are child survivors or refugees who felt that nobody wanted to hear their story. They weren't in the camps, they didn't have a tattoo. Why should I do a testimony? I'm sure you've heard this, Tali, also. And I give them the analogy of the Holocaust being like a great big jigsaw puzzle. Maybe some people had bigger pieces of the puzzle, other people maybe had smaller pieces, but we're missing 6 million pieces. So let's try and get as many stories recorded as we can. And that's usually how I get people to agree to give testimony if they think that their testimony has no value or has little value. That's what I used to reassure them. And I still also get the occasional camp survivor, but they're up there in years. So I'm not getting too many of those. But over the years, I have to say I've been incredibly lucky in that I was in Washington, D.C. doing these interviews. And most survivors did not come to Washington to work for the federal government. And the federal government was a main employer in Washington, D.C. So they came for other reasons. Some of them were career military. They were refugees who got out and joined the U.S. Army or whatever and stayed for their careers. So, that's a really unusual perspective. I also had the good fortune of interviewing people who came to DC for the Nuremberg reunion. So I got to meet some Nurembergers that I would not have met. So, I have a very eclectic collection of interviews. I interviewed 2 spies. One would not admit on camera she was a spy. After we packed up, she said, "Oh, you mean when I worked for the agency?" The agency is a reference to the CIA. Now that the camera's off, now she tells me. So I had incredible good luck to be in DC, to have those opportunities. And when I started doing the interviews and I was getting more involved with the second generation, they seemed to go hand in hand. The children of survivors would often only get pieces of stories, just like I got anecdotal stories. I didn't get a gestalt from my mother. I just got pieces. And I also knew the frustration from the family members that you could follow your parent or grandparent around with a tape recorder for years and still not get everything. So I did the best I could, in large part because I didn't want anybody else to have what I had. I had this big hole that was my mother's story. I just have a few anecdotal pieces of it. And I didn't want that for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. But the involvement of the children and many times the grandchildren in it. And I'll bring Sharon in because she's a grandchild. So Sharon, join this conversation and perhaps tell us, because you are the 3rd generation, the grandchild. First of all, tell us a little bit about your grandparents and what piqued your interest? Why are you the child that is interested in the story?
For many years, I wasn't interested. And I think working for Zikaron BaSalon is my tikkun, is my repair. Because while unfortunately, I don't hold my own family history, I now hold the memories and the testimonies of many other survivors. I grew up in Israel, and for us, we felt whether you had blood ties to the Shoah, whether your grandparents were survivors or not, you felt as if you are a third generation to the Shoah. It's very, very present, and it's part of our identity. We study about the Shoah in schools. We have ceremonies. We have the siren every year. So it's really a big part of our identity. I only recently discovered that my grandfather from my mother's side, who was born in Rome, managed to escape the deportation and join the partisans. So this affected him tremendously, and his life ended very, very soon after I was born. I actually did not know that he was alive when I was born. I thought he passed away a lot, many years before I was born, but I only now discovered it. And in fact, in November of 2022, I had the privilege of meeting my great uncle, who his youngest brother is still in Italy, in Rome, and my mother, my sister, and I went to visit this great uncle I never knew I had, and it was extremely, extremely powerful. Yeah, so all of a sudden I have shreds of a story, but unfortunately, no one is able to complete the gaps that I have. And Esther, I just wanted to say, you're talking about the puzzle pieces. I think it's the best analogy I've heard about the Shoah, and I'm going to adopt it. Thank you.
Bevakasha.
Thank you, Sharon. And I think there is quite a lot in common between you, Sharon, the third generation, Esther, the second generation. And I can certainly say about myself that my father was a silent survivor. He wasn't a survivor that spoke. He was very traumatized. He was a teenager when he was in the camps, and he certainly was not a speaker. His older brother, my uncle, was the one that spoke and wrote poetry and interviewed for for Shoah Foundation and so on. But my father, nothing. What is quite interesting, and I want to add it because it is what Sharon was talking about now, finding suddenly a relative that you never knew existed, is also finding documents, finding other pieces of the puzzle, as you said, that I managed to do in the last years through known archives like the BaSalon, so the tracing services. During COVID, asked them about my father and got 48 documents I never seen in my life that shone a light that I never knew, about places he was and so on. And then local archives, local researchers in Poland that sent me every few years. I get something like, what? Wow, like the tombstone of my grandfather, my father's father, that was found in 2021, or in November, this last November, the last letter, handwritten letter by my grandmother that saved actually the lives of my father. She asked for medical treatment in a camp where he was. And that letter, written in April 1942, and she was murdered in August of 1942. So, you know,
Wow.
these pieces of the puzzle that you spoke about, I want to say that we, the descendants, are also completing sometimes the family's history. But I want to move, Sharon, to education then. What is the role of the descendants in education? Because you ask yourself the question, why to remember? Why we remember? So maybe speak a little bit about it. You have the Zikaron BaSalon experience, but give us maybe a few examples of where do you see it when you were with Vanda now, 500 people. What did they learn through interacting with Vanda Albinski, as I said, a Johannesburg survivor? I'm just very curious.
I think this world will be far better if we'll have better education systems across the globe, but if we'll also invest in in-person encounters. And I think that the ability, so we are not historians. Zikaron BaSalon, we are not historians. We are very, the Zikaron BaSalon format is the informal way to bring the memory into every space, whether it's a 500 seat theater, or it's a classroom, or a living room with 8 people. The idea is that we do it in an informal way, and we stay away from the history lessons or the lectures. We want people to connect in a personal way. And we've done some projects with museums, Holocaust museums across the globe, as well as educators, and we see it works. And I think that the reason why it works is because you're allowing people to connect. And we all need a bit more connection between one another. And in terms of the role of the descendants, who's better to bring that responsibility forward than the people that saw it heard it in their homes, but also, let's admit it, look at us, the trauma passes from generation to generation. Of course, it's less now, but if you look at the world today, I think also as a third generation or as a fourth generation, as Jews, not only we're bringing the past to the table or to the living room, but we're also enabling a conversation about the present. And I think it's very, very important nowadays, especially after October 7, and of course the horrific rise in anti-Semitism across many countries.
So the connections. Esther, for you?
Well, I was going to say, we were talking about education. One of the things that I didn't mention is I'm on the Governor's Advisory Council on Education relating to the Holocaust here in Nevada. And we just, we've been very busy. We just 2 weeks ago signed into law establishing January 27th as International Holocaust Remembrance Day in the state of Nevada, which is, I wasn't sure we'd get that up and running, but we did. And I was actually with the governor, along with some survivors from the Las Vegas area. We were flown up to our state capital, and we were there to watch the governor sign that. So that was, and the survivors are not so young, so it's a little hard to move them from city to city to do something like this, but it was really very nice. And also, one of the other things that the Governor's Council has done over the years and continues to do is have educational programs. So we've had conferences for teachers We've had student and teacher conferences. I worked with our local federation to do a Holocaust Seder, which was actually oversubscribed. That's a high quality problem to have, that you have more people than you expected. So we're reaching a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. And that's something that, I'm not the only one doing this. There are many, many of us, descendants and non-descendants, who have that passion and really care and try to work to make Holocaust education relevant so that it resonates with people. Because if you're just talking about dead Jews, no one's going to care. But if you show them how it's relevant to me as a human being, I'm likely to fall into this same trap given these same circumstances. Or this is what my life would be like, not as a Jewish victim, but if I lived in Nazi Germany and I was told by my government I needed to have 10 children, or whatever the example might be. Try to get it so it relates to people's lives, and then it resonates. And then hopefully we can do something to make this world a better place.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, and Esther, I mean, you spoke. I remember a few years ago in Comic-Con. I mean,
yeah,
probably 10,000 people listened to you, and that is the thing that you have to get to the younger generation. So, what are some of those new ways to get to the new generation? Is what you did, speaking Comic-Con.
yeah, that was that was not my usual thing. What can I tell you? People kept asking me, what are you going to dress up as at Comic-Con? What costume are you going? So I'm going as a mere mortal.
Yeah.
What do I know from this stuff? But it was during COVID that I think we hit 10,000 views.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And these are the important things of thinking. I mean, Pinchas, you are with us today, and to think that the children, grandchildren, and others are picking up the torch. They are doing it, and Sharon, you spoke about the survivors, Hannah and Zvi, and the survivors that are, Elie Wiesel said, when you listen to a witness, you become a witness. He said it actually during a March of the Living many, many years ago. And it's very, very true. You're doing it. You're doing it very well. So maybe there are millions of questions. So I want to go to the audience question, but maybe the last thought from you is, so where are we going? Your children, your grandchildren, where will they continue? Do you see it as a legacy? What do you see as the role of the descendants? Esther, let's start with you.
There are some grandchildren of survivors who are interested and some who are not. But I think things have changed since October 7th, because a lot of young Jews in this country, at least, didn't see the same anti-Semitism that their grandparents or great-grandparents saw. Well, now they see it. Now they see it. It's in their face. So they're waking up a little bit. But I wanted to respond to something you just said about Pinchas. Hello, Pinchas. I know you're out there somewhere. Just yesterday, we had our Yom HaShoah program here, and Stephen Smith was our speaker, and he showed us his hologram with Pinchas. So I got to see you yesterday, too. So it was, it has a ripple effect from generation to generation. Let me just say, my children, for example, all of their grandparents were survivors. So the seeds are planted in my kids. We'll see what grows. My grandkids, my Eineklich, are little. So there's nothing yet going on.
Yeah, we will have to interview you in 10 years' time. We have no choice. Put it in your calendar. Sharon,
I might be doing an interview, so let's wait and see.
Yeah. Sharon, for you?
2 weeks ago, roughly, give or take, we read the Haggadah, the story of Exodus, of Bnei Israel living in Egypt. And when we read the Haggadah, we actually read the parts of how they wrote it. So this Rebbe and this Rebbe sat in Bnei Brak and they wrote it and so on. We are at a point in history, we are writing the Haggadah of how to commemorate the Holocaust. We are in a very crucial point in time. And believe me, Tali, the team of Zikaron BaSalon does everything to stay relevant for the younger generation, from TikTok to any new platform, metaverse. But our conclusion every time is nothing is better than the gathering itself. And no matter how trendy or cool or young we are trying to be, even the 12-year-old, the 13-year-old, the 14-year-old, they actually want to sit down, they want to listen, and they want to converse. And I'll just end that my daughter, my youngest, she's gonna turn 8 on Yom HaAtzmaut, on Israel Independence Day. And last week on Yom HaShoah, she woke up in the morning and she said to me, "Mommy, today is your day. It's Yom HaShoah." So she already understands the importance of this day. And of course, they know to what extent, and they stand in the siren. But I think, like I said, it's a turning point, and this is now an opportunity for us to make sure that the next generation understand, and not just understand the headlines, they understand what was lost, the how many communities, how much art, wisdom, everything that was lost, but also how we prevailed and how we've managed to come out of it and build communities, families, businesses, countries. So I think while we are mourning the Holocaust, we also have a lot to be grateful for.
Can I
Yes,
add
of
something?
course. Of course.
I'm also part of the executive committee of the World Federation of Jewish Holocaust Survivors and Descendants, and they put on an annual conference. And this year it's going to be in Paris in September, but they are very much encouraging the grandchildren to come. And, you know, they're beginning to pass the torch on to the next generation. And in GSI, I see that, you know, we're going to be passing that torch as well. So we are very painfully aware that we're losing our survivors. And we're also losing second generation.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
the
I
time-
mean, 80 years is 80 years. I mean, we can't ignore that.
the clock is ticking for everybody.
Excellent.
Tally froze.
Oh, Tally froze.
No, she's back.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You froze for a moment.
Sorry.
Must be cold there.
Sorry, my internet. Sorry, it's not the Zoom this time. It's the internet.
No?
No, I'm saying it's. I just said that 80 years later, with many of the second generation born in the DP camps or a few years after, you know, it is exactly what you're saying, Esther and Sharon, and yet the interest is there, and there are many, many, many questions that I really do want to take, and one of them is really an interesting one to both of you. What does it mean to you to be part of this chain, historical chain, memory chain, to be the voice for a story you didn't witness, but are now entrusted to tell? It's a beautiful question. And what is the deep meaning for you to be part of the chain? I don't know which one of you want to,
Who wants to go
answer
first?
Yeah.
Sharon, you want to go first, or you want me to jump in?
Whatever suits you, Esther.
Bavakasha, go ahead.
Okay. So maybe I shared with you how Zikaron BaSalon started, but I'll like to tell you how I got involved. And I got involved in 2016, and I won't go into all the details. Maybe one day if we have time, in 10 years from now. But in 2016, I was working for the Israeli embassy in London, and I was introduced to this new concept emerging out of Israel called Zikaron BaSalon. And you have these lovely gatherings, and I heard effectively the same story that I shared with you. And I was very cynical. And I thought, I work for the embassy, I work for the government, I know how to commemorate, I'm a third generation. I don't need to be told how to commemorate. And that year I joined March of the Living. I joined the UK delegation. And on my way to Poland, I suddenly remembered this new initiative, and I decided to give it a try. And I got to the hotel, I looked online, I saw how simple it is, got back to the lobby of the hotel, and I met Mala Tribich, who's a Holocaust survivor and a very, very good friend of mine from London. And I said to Mala, listen, there's this thing I'm going to host in my home on Sunday. I know it's Wednesday, we're coming back from the march on Friday. Do you mind showing up? And she said, sure. Invited a few friends, and Sunday came, and Mala, my husband went to get her. She comes in, she sits down. We are about 10 of us, 11 of us. And the first thing that Mala says is, oh, this is very peculiar. I'm not used to speaking to such small audience. And I just wanted, the ground to swallow me. I was so embarrassed to make her come on a Sunday after coming back from Poland. I was very, very embarrassed. But as soon as she started speaking, I vividly remember feeling the weight on my shoulders. I felt as if her story is being passed to me. And I love the question because this is exactly how I describe it. Although I'm a third generation, born and raised in Israel, part of the educational system, stood every year in a siren, this was the first time that I felt that I'm a link in the chain. And that was so powerful for me. I'll say that at the end, I approached Mala and we've given her flowers and we thanked her. But I also said that I apologize for making her come. And Mala said that that evening changed her life because she's so used to speaking from a pedestal. She's used to speaking from a stage, from a podium. And it was the first time that the eyes of the participants spoke back to her. And it was very different than what she was used to. And of course, if you wake me in the middle of the night, I can share with you Mala's testimony. Until this day, we're very, very close, and I've adopted her, and she adopted me as a surrogate grandmother. Well, not surrogate, maybe that's the wrong word, but you know what I
An
mean.
additional one.
Additional one, yes.
Beautiful.
So this is how I feel a link in the chain.
And Esther, for you?
And for me, I have a totally different perspective on this. I grew up in this country, in the United States, as a child of immigrants. And I knew something bad had happened to my parents. And I could see that sometimes they were uncomfortable talking about what happened to them. And I started learning more and more about the Holocaust. And then I thought, I heard the stories about the sheep to the slaughter. I went, no, that's nonsense. Nonsense. I am so proud to be a member of the Holocaust survivor community. I am so proud that my parents were survivors and not perpetrators. I am so proud that they got through that with their humanity intact. And I feel like telling the world. And I'm trying to teach my children also. You have what to be proud of. You are part of a very strong people with a powerful tradition. That's my connection in the link.
Amazing,
I
amazing.
second that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I'm thinking about the connection in the link in the chain, even for me, it's I chose that. It's a fact that my brother is not that connection in the link, so in the chain. So there is also a choice, an active choice, I think, in doing that. And I want to just divert and say that Pinchas wrote in the chat that he did a Zikaron BaSalon, Sharon, on Yom HaShoah, and I am so proud of you, Pinchas, because you spoke in Hebrew to
Wow.
80 people and for the Israeli consulate and so on in Toronto. And it's not easy. It's not easy. Well done. Amazing. What an achievement. There are many, many questions. We do not have a lot of time, so I chose only 2 or 3, and let's try and see how many more we can cover. If you could send one message to future generations, those who will never meet a survivor firsthand, what would you want them to know, to feel, to remember? Again, great question.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Esther, you want to start this one?
Yeah, sure. We're so polite. We go back, you go. No, you go. One of the things that I would really like people to understand is that we share a common humanity. And so many people don't think about that. They think, oh, the Holocaust that happened to the Jews. It could have happened to anybody. And it has happened to other people. And I would like people to, if they could, see some of these testimonies. That's one of the things that I try to, to try to elicit is, let the survivors speak from their heart. Some of them will say, well, I wrote down my story, and I don't want you to speak from your paper. I want you to speak from your heart. And I want you to share in detail what it was like to be hungry, to be cold, to be afraid. Let people see that they have this common link with you of basic humanity. And that's what I would like for people to see, because maybe if we could get that across, there'd be much less hate in this world. I know I'm a dreamer.
Yeah, yeah. But it's a beautiful message. I just remember a Holocaust survivor that immigrated from Germany with his parents as a child to South Africa, Franz Auerbach, Dr. Franz Auerbach. In South Africa during apartheid, you had to say if you're white or black. And he wrote to the ministry and said, can I change my classification to human being? And that's what you're saying, Esther. They said to him, no, you can't, but I just want to be a human. Yeah. Sharon.
Given the fact that Esther gave the perfect answer, in Israel, the Holocaust Remembrance Day is called Yom HaZikaron LaShoah VeLaGvura. It's the Remembrance Day for the Holocaust, but also for the, how do you say Gvura, Tali?
Courage,
heroism.
bravery. Yeah.
Yes, bravery. And I think when people hear courage or bravery, they immediately think about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising or the Sobibor Uprising, and they think of the small, the weak with pistols or trying to fight. But if my message to future generations that will not be able to hear firsthand testimonies is that bravery and courage was every minute of every day, everywhere. From Dr. Halina Rothstein, the mother of Vanda, who saved the life of her children, but then decided that she will not leave her patients and went on the train with them to Treblinka. From mothers and fathers who had to take very difficult decisions in order to save life, people who broke their miserable piece of bread to two to feed a friend or gave a helping hand during the death march. The bravery and courage happened all the time. Also, of course, spiritual bravery, those who kept their Jewish traditions in the camps, in the ghetto, those who remained human beings. So if there is one thing that I will want future generations to know, is that.
Beautiful answer. Esther, a question to you. There are many questions to each one of you, but maybe I'll choose one. For you personally, Esther, what has been the most meaningful or surprising moment in your journey of remembrance and activism?
Not been one moment, but actually there was. Shortly after I gave birth to my first child, I was sitting in the rocking chair and I was nursing her, I was breastfeeding her. And I looked at my beautiful baby and I thought, the Nazis would hurt you. And then I caught myself, hurt you? They would kill you and us too, because at this point, my husband and I would have gone with her. And that's when I woke up again. I asked about the Holocaust when I was a student, but then I got out of school and I started my career and I put all that away for a while until I was holding my baby. And that moment shook me to my core. So if there was one moment that really grabbed me, that was it. When I realized at this moment, I no longer would have had a chance to survive. I would be done. And then I came back to all this. I started getting involved again.
Yeah.
I'm going to cry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's an emotional one. Yeah. And the fact is you're doing and doing and doing and redoing and tomorrow interviewing another survivor. So it's really, really unbelievable and very inspiring. Sharon, in your work and personal journey, where do you find hope? Even when facing such painful histories all the time? I mean, your child, 8 years old, said, "It's your day, Holocaust Day." It's remind me of my kids say, "What is your mother do?" My mother does genocide. Yeah, sounds very good. Perpetrator. But what does give you hope? What does give you, meaning, perhaps?
That's so easy. Obviously, the survivors. After October 7, the day of October 7, we woke up like the rest of Israel to the sound of the first siren, and we realized that something else is going on. And by noon, we've started an emergency call center because we realized that the Holocaust survivors are probably reliving their childhood traumas and perhaps they need assistance. And the country was in a very bad shape for months after. We wanted to make sure that every need of a Holocaust survivor, and for that matter of an old person, because we started getting calls just from everyone, will be met. But while we were calling Holocaust survivors to make sure that they are all right, we noticed very soon that they started telling us, "Oh, don't worry, we will be all right." So we came to support them and felt supported by them. And I think every Zikaron BaSalon, there is one difference I want to touch on. Up until October 7, I'm sharing something very personal. Up until October 7, whenever I sat next to a Holocaust survivor and I heard a testimony, in my mind, my brain pictured that in black and white. whenever I heard a testimony, it's black and white. This is what we were used to. This is the images, the film that we watched. Since October 7, I see it in color. And October 7 painted the Shoah in my mind. But every time I sit next to a Holocaust survivor, I get a wave of hope. And especially when I see the interaction with the younger generation, I tell myself, okay, there is hope for this world.
Yeah, so much to teach us still, which is amazing, and the resilience is amazing. And it's not rosy and balloons. We learn from Pinchas.
No,
There are difficult days, there are difficult years. It's hard, but still we can wake up again and build again and act again and
we
be
rise.
good and human. Yeah, again.
Mm.
So amazing. So the last questions, and these are difficult ones, but I think it's important to maybe ask ourselves, the two of you, those questions as well. For many survivors, silence was a form of protection or resilience. So how should that shape the way we approach remembrance today? And those difficult stories that were too painful to be told, what responsibility do we have to tell those stories? You know, and we speak about the survivors that speak, but how do we represent for generations to come the silences, the pain, the taboos, the difficulties? Will those disappear, do you think? Or do we have responsibility to think about how to tell those for the future? It's a good question. Thinking for myself as a daughter of a silent father, you know, what is my responsibility to tell his story, and my children to tell his story? Esther, any thoughts after speaking to so many survivors?
I will say one of the things that we do when we do interviews is we ask what's off the table. What do you not want to talk about? And usually they say, oh, you can ask me anything. It's not always true, but you can ask me anything. I have done interviews with survivors where they suddenly become silent and they need to collect their thoughts and they need to get a handle on their emotions. And they're free to continue or not continue. But usually, if you give them the space and you're a good listener, they will open up. Now, I have had the experience of having done an interview with a woman who was liberated by Russian soldiers. She was with a group of women that were liberated by Russian soldiers, and they were not treated well. Let's just put it that way. And I asked her, she didn't want to talk about it, but she did tell me that some of the women that she was with committed suicide after liberation, not from the Nazis, but from the Russians. And I talked to her and I said, are you willing to say you're an eyewitness? Not, I didn't ask, are you a victim? Are you willing to say you're an eyewitness? And that she could do. So I got it out of her that way. I didn't go through the front door. I went through the back door. But I got it. But if they don't want to talk, they don't want to talk. My mother-in-law, every time I would ask her, and she should rest in peace, I would ask her a question and she would cry. And I would wait. I'd let her finish crying. And then I'd still be waiting for an answer. And she wasn't used to that. She was used to, she would cry and everybody would leave her alone. Well, she hadn't met me before. I was a little different. But I think once she started talking, once you're able to say it and you can you can quantify it, you can get a handle on it, sometimes it's helpful. And many times the survivors have said that after they've given their testimony, it's proven to be therapeutic. They've discharged a burden. So sometimes if you're just a good listener and you're patient and they know that you care, I'll be willing to talk. I never force anything out of anybody. And, you know, there's so many things we will never know. God will know, but we will never know.
Yeah,
I think
and I think just to say that for future generations, some of the taboos are breaking, and researchers wrote about certain aspects that were never spoken about before. But I think you're right. It's just to honor the fact that many stories are very painful, and we need to also remember the silences. Sharon.
I think in the early years after the war, there was silence for many, many reasons. And in fact, the change came only after the Eichmann trial. And I think there were many reasons. We can't just pinpoint one and say this was the reason, but for the most part, I also think survivors probably thought no one would believe them. And the things that had happened to them were, who will take them seriously? And once the Eichmann trial took place, and so many survivors took the stand and delivered their testimonies to the world, I think that gave the courage. And I also think that we have the perspective of time. And as we progress from the Holocaust, it makes it a little bit easier. But in 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, you're right, Tali, we will remember those that were recorded, those who shared will read the history books. The responsibility about talking and bringing the trauma and the silence and everything that you mentioned will be on the descendants. We will be the one to say, by the way, this is how it used to be. But I think judging from the way we are reading our history from 5,000 years ago, the testimonies that we will remember, of course, will be those that of those who have shared and spoke.
Yeah, and I think that you are right, Sharon, that the responsibility for the descendants is to also speak about the stories, the incomplete stories.
Yeah.
Esther, your mother's story, my father's story, others that we do not have recording of, we do not have the full story of, but the silence and the trauma and the pain tells a huge story as well, and that is the responsibility also of the descendants to acknowledge and remember, and that those voices will not be forgotten, and that can be done by writing, by films, by social media, and all the things that we know. But I'm thinking, you know, as we speak about Mendelssohn's book, The Lost, about 6 of the 6 million, where he's looking, tracing his family. And he says a sentence that we actually use in our exhibition, where he says, when we think about loss, we think only about the people that were killed, but it's beyond that. It's the families that will not be born, the art that will never be created, the medicine that will never be invented, and so on and so forth. But what I want to end, because our time is sadly over, is to say that the survivors are giving us their stories. You, the second generation, the third generation, the fourth generation, but also the many educators, the museums, the dedicated people, psychologists, filmmakers, writers. You are continuing and continuing these stories, and talking about those losses that it's very, very difficult to put in one box and remember in one sentence. So before we end, Esther, Sharon, any last sentence that you would like to share with our audience before I hand over back to Ellen? It was really such an honor to speak to both of you. Esther, a last word to our audience today?
I feel like we just had a beginning.
Mm.
There's so much more that we could talk about. And I just keep looking forward to the next interview and the next interview and all the wonderful people I get to meet. And what an honor it is to share a moment with them that's going to last forever. I mean, these interviews are transcendent. They will live beyond the survivor. They will live beyond me. And I always tell them, just remember, you're talking to generations that haven't been born yet. So talk about being a link in a chain. That's another way to do it. And I don't know, maybe one day we can continue this. It was interesting, but I feel like there's so much more that we haven't even touched the surface on.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one of the questions was, we start with remembrance. What is next? So it's exactly that. Sharon, last word.
Just to remind you that it's on us, and each and every one of us has the responsibility to make sure that the testimonies of the Shoah will not be forgotten and will be passed to the future generations with our commitment for a better future.
Amen. Thank you, Sharon. And Ellen?
I'm just going to say,
yes.
if people know survivors who have not yet given their testimony, please encourage them to contact the Shoah Foundation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Never, it's not too late. Thank you so much for your honesty, for your sharing, for both of you. It was absolutely an honor to have this conversation. And Ellen, back to you.
Fantastic. So I will formally bring us to a close for today's session. Of course, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to all of you for joining us today. And a special thank you to Tali, Esther, and Sharon for sharing your expertise and your unwavering dedication to Holocaust education. You remind us that memory isn't just something we honor, it's something we carry forward through our words, our actions, and the way we choose to live. As we leave this space today, let us remember that it's now up to us to keep these stories alive, to speak out against hatred, to stand for resilience, and to build a future rooted in remembrance and hope. We are profoundly grateful for your generous support, and I would like to honor a few people who made today's program possible: Dawn and Helene Linzer, Dr. Robert Schoen and Nancy Bernstein, Jonathan and Angela Kamen, the Plung and Resnick families. Their generosity fuels our mission and helps us continue to bring meaningful educational experiences to our community. Thank you all for being part of this journey. We look forward to seeing you at our future programs as we continue to learn, remember, and take action together. The next session in this series will be held on May 21st at 3 p.m., and the title of that is On Darkness and Light, the Inspiring Story of Survivors. Through the amazing history of survivors of the Holocaust, Professor Hannah Yabakova seeks to examine the essence of darkness and draw on the array of coordinates that set us on how to extract the light from darkness. These inspirational revivals will be told in the context of the birth of the Jewish state of Israel. For all of you here in today's session, the link for all of these events remains the same, although we certainly welcome you to register again. Thank you, all of you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye, everyone.